Hi. So today I want to talk about something because it's taking over the internet and taking over many young girls' minds. If you are someone who is on any short form video content platform like TikTok, Instagram, or maybe even on here on YouTube Shorts, there's a video format that you've probably seen. So picture this, a girl, usually a thin white girl in her late teens or early 20s, films herself in some soft lighting, maybe a blank room or maybe an overly decorated room, and the audio is usually, I don't know, Lana Del Rey or some slowed remix of a 2000s pop song. And she shows off like what she has, her outfit, polka dots, stripes, whatever the new trend is, her exact shade of the lip gloss that she's wearing, her hair clips that she's wearing, her water bottle. The caption will say something like, "This is girlhood," and then a bunch of cute emojis after that. When these phrases go viral, they get stripped out of context and flattened into content, and most importantly, monetized. Girl math becomes an excuse for overconsumption. It's girl math if I return one thing so that the other thing is free. Blah, blah, blah. The phrase was supposed to be self-aware and playful, and now it's a marketing tool in a way. Do you ever see like brands post about girl math and then you're just like, and it feels off to you but you're not sure why? That's because instead of using it as like women relating to one another and their own experiences, it's a brand trying to get you to buy more things. It's not them accurately having fun with the trend. So this is how capitalism works with any attempt at liberation or authentic expression. It finds the language, it strips out the resistance, and it sells it back to you. Remember girl boss? It went from being a feminist rallying cry to a marketing demographic in about, 3 years time or even less. Now girlhood is becoming the same thing. It's really sad to admit, but it is heading that way. Much of girlhood aesthetic content is explicitly nostalgic. It references specific points from childhood and products and media and the girly like fabrics and patterns from the early 2000s and early 2010s. Littlest Pet Shop, Webkins, Justice, Club Penguin, flip phones with charms, limited edition lip glosses from Claire's. We can all remember it fondly. And that aesthetic is trying to bottle that feeling of being a preteen girl in the 2000s. But before social media really existed, before everything, oh my god, wait. But we have to remember that that was before social media really truly existed, or at least our generation interacted with it, before everything felt quite so complicated. There's genuine emotion in this girlhood nostalgia. Many of these women who are participating in this are in their 20s now, processing the transition into adulthood and maybe mourning the loss of a simpler time, of simple aesthetics that they wish they enjoyed more. But here's where it gets complicated. The nostalgia is being processed entirely through consumer goods. And a lot of people contributing to it are complacent. Girlhood becomes defined by the things that you own. If you had these specific toys, wore these specific clothes, shopped at these specific stores, then you had an authentic girlhood. And yeah, everyone participating in girlhood now is reliving the experiences that everyone must have had, right? It creates a really narrow, specific, particularly white middle class idea of girlhood. And if your childhood didn't recognize shopping at Justice or collecting Webkins, or just being stereotypically girly, even if it was just because your parents couldn't afford it, maybe these stores didn't exist in your country because, whatever reason, or maybe you just weren't interested, then you're excluded from this nostalgia. And see, look at these trends and how they categorize beauty. There's deer pretty, siren pretty, doe eyes, hunter eyes. This isn't just silly fun, it's creating really rigid taxonomies of acceptable femininity. The beauty industry has always done this, but now young women are doing it to each other without realizing it, and with even more granular specificity, with even less room for deviation. It turns childhood into a commodity retroactively. Your experiences growing up only matter so far as they can be aestheticized and shared on social media. The memory isn't valuable for what is meant to you, it's valuable for how it photographs and for how it looks on your social media page. And it suggests that the path back to that feeling of childhood joy is through purchasing new versions of these old products. Yes, so girlhood and the aesthetic now is not really focused entirely on what you used to have, but it's this new revitalization of these old products and aesthetics, as I mentioned, kind of giving into those frills and polka dots and overall micro trends, but just fun, girly things that maybe you didn't get to experience as much as a kid, or you did experience it and you want to relive it and reclaim it and just have fun with it. But it's just nostalgia being sold back to you. For example, there's an artist who made a handmade like paper fabric crown. It was really intricate and personal. Each of them were unique, and she posted them online and they went viral overnight without expectation. And then something happened that perfectly encapsulates this whole phenomenon. People didn't want to make their own crowns. They wanted to buy that exact same crown. Or they made carbon copies of the photos they saw of her art on Pinterest, posed the same way, trying to recreate the aesthetic rather than being inspired to create something personal to them. So companies ended up reaching out to this girl, wanting to mass produce these crowns and to turn them into something, not into something handmade and individual, but something mass-produced to the general public. The thing that made these crowns special was their uniqueness, their handmade quality, and the fact that it was an art piece specifically by that person. And that was exactly what was stripped away in mass production. This is the nostalgia trap. Seeing something authentic and wanting to consume it rather than create something authentic yourself. It doesn't seem like people are being inspired by this girlhood phenomenon, rather taking advantage of it and thinking, okay, I have to participate in this specific way. And there's a strange paradox at the heart of aesthetic culture. Everyone is trying to express their individual identity by doing the same exact thing as everyone else. The girlhood aesthetic videos all follow similar formats. Of course, it's kind of based on what goes viral because people want to see success on their social media pages, but the products they feature are almost identical. The rooms look the same: LED lights, white walls, pink curtains, from Target, things from Target or IKEA, the same organization systems, the same decorative objects, but the framing is always about individual expression. It doesn't seem very individual to me. Of course you can enjoy it, but it's not very individual. The language emphasizes uniqueness while the visuals are so obviously conformity. And this isn't hypocrisy, it's natural to result in this way when you're trying to perform identity in algorithmic spaces. The algorithm rewards similarity. Content that looks like other successful content gets promoted. So if you want your videos to be seen, especially in TikTok's crazy, weird algorithm, it needs to follow the established visual language. But this creates a feedback loop. Everyone makes similar content to get algorithmic promotion, and then the algorithm determines, okay, this is the girlhood aesthetic. And then people will take that and keep making that because it's successful. New creators will study these successful videos and replicate them, and the aesthetic becomes more and more homogeneous, while the language around it becomes more general and more about individual expression when it really isn't. So the individuality is supposed to come from your unique combination of the same products, your personal arrangement of the same aesthetic products, the same trending products. It's mass-produced uniqueness. But before we go further, it's worth asking, what need is this filling? The most generous interpretation of that is a genuine attempt to reclaim femininity in a culture that has simultaneously demanded it and devalued it. For decades, feminine aesthetics were mocked. The 2010s cool girl was someone who explicitly rejected femininity. You know, she was one of the boys. She ate burgers and drank beer with the guys. She was not like other girls, etc., etc. And that cultural moment did real damage. It taught young women that femininity itself was shameful, and you're not going to be taken as seriously unless you act like and hang around guys. So part of what's happening now is a correction of that. Women saying, actually, I do like feminine things and I'm not being forced into it. I like pink. I like frills. I like these things that were coded as lesser, and I'm not going to apologize for that. I'm just a girl. That impulse is so valid and important. The pushback against pick-me culture, the embrace of being a girl's girl, the celebration of female friendships, these are all responses to real problems in real life. Women were taught to see other women as competition, to bond with men by mocking feminine interests, and rejecting that is meaningful. But somewhere between I'm allowed to like feminine things and girlhood is these specific feminine products. Something got lost and confused so badly. And there's the tension. If men get to enjoy their hobbies and interests without constant scrutiny, if men get to be silly and playful without being called childish, then why can't women? Well, it's a fair question. Multiple things are true at once. Women should be able to enjoy things without judgment, whatever they want. And, maybe not everything, but I mean aesthetically. And the structure that's emerged around girlhood and aesthetics is exploitative. And it's possible to celebrate femininity without defining it through consumption. And critique of a trend is not the same as criticism of individuals participating and engaging with it. So, one of the most troubling aspects of girlhood aesthetic culture is the way that it presents itself and presents a single specific experience as universal and then tries to sell that to everyone in modern day. When someone posts girlhood or girlhood is followed by various images of the products that they have laid out aesthetically, they're making a claim about a shared experience, but the we in these videos is so narrow. It's usually North American or European middle class cisgender people. I don't want to be too woke, but not everyone has the same experience with girlhood. Girlhood is getting your first period while wearing white pants. Girlhood is shopping at Limited 2 or Justice. Girlhood is straightening your hair in middle school bathrooms with your friends. These might be someone's experiences, but they're not everyone's. They're presented as universal, as the definitive girlhood, so that it can be simple and photographed and the visual aesthetic. But this erasure is disguised as inclusion. It erases the girls who grew up poor, girls who grew up in non-Western cultures, girls whose relationship to femininity was complicated by race, sexuality, or gender identity, girls who are the weird girl and got bullied by others for not performing femininity correctly. And now kind of the same thing is happening. And we need to talk about that last group specifically because, discourse around girlhood aesthetics, people saying, oh, you can't criticize this, where's your fun and whimsy? And girls. That culture means universal sisterhood, but that's not true. Girls can be really cruel to other girls, especially girls who are neurodivergent, gender nonconforming, or just different. The narrative is that girlhood is about pink bows, everyone getting along, supportive best friends, and it erases the experiences of girls who didn't experience this, girls who were ostracized, who didn't fit in, who found community elsewhere, because the girly girls rejected them. Your girlhood was real, even if it looked nothing like the aesthetic. And if it did look like the aesthetic, it's real too. Even if you hated pink or loved pink, even if other girls were mean to you, or if you're super popular in middle school or whenever, it's true to you. There's no one way to have been a girl. So it's a little concerning that this narrow aesthetic has such a large label. There's something exhausting about the way girlhood aesthetics function. They're never complete. There's always a new trend popping up, always something else to buy, always another aesthetic to try out, and this is by design. Micro trends must cycle quickly because if a trend lasts too long, then people stop buying new things because, they still have what's trendy. The entire system demands a perpetual dissatisfaction. And clean girl is already over. Now, you need to be something entirely else. You need to reject that and consume more. It just keeps changing. It's over and over again. And this is consumption disguised as identity exploration. It's presented as finding yourself, finding what works for you, discovering your aesthetic, but the structure ensures that you never quite arrive at what is meant for you. And because it's framed as a silly and just a girly girl thing, it's harder to step back and say, this is exhausting. This doesn't feel like authentic self-expression anymore. We also need to talk about the material reality of what's being consumed. Girlhood aesthetics are so overwhelmingly about physical objects, and the speed of microtrends means that these objects are designed for short-term use. You could buy these aesthetic items, use them for 6 weeks, and then move on, while you still have barely even used the full tube of lip gloss you've ordered. The fashion industry is already one of the world's largest polluters. Ultra fast fashion brands like Shein are frequently featured in girlhood aesthetic videos, or websites that source from fast fashion things like AliExpress and Shein, Taobao. These go quickly and cheaply. They're essentially disposable. They're made by workers in exploitative conditions, shipped across the world, and worn a few times, thrown away. The cute organizational bins, the aesthetic room decor, the trendy accessories, most of these are plastic, even the clothes. They'll break in a couple months, rip, they can't be recycled, and that will exist in the landfill for centuries. These aesthetic items that are performing girlhood are actively destroying the worlds that these girls will inherit. And the tragedy is that this isn't framed as a problem. It's framed as empowerment, as self-care, as celebrating femininity and treating yourself. And there's a deeper question about what's happening to femininity itself in these spaces. Second wave feminism fought for women to be taken seriously, which often meant minimizing femininity itself. Third wave feminism said women can be feminine and taken seriously. And now we're at fourth wave feminism, where femininity is a performance and gender is constructed. We can play with these signifiers consciously. But girlhood aesthetics seem to be doing something different. Even though you'd think feminism and girlhood would go hand in hand, girlhood aesthetic is doing something more regressive. They're not playing with femininity as a constructed performance, but they're essentializing it. They're saying, this is what girlhood is. These specific behaviors, these specific aesthetics and products and clothes. It's femininity, but stripped of any politics, any complexity, any acknowledgement of how gender is used to control and constrain people. And there's also a biological essentialism creeping into some of this discourse that's genuinely concerning. The idea that there's something innately female about certain behaviors and colors and consumption. Girl math isn't just a joke, but now it's suggesting that women's brains work differently, that our logic is inherently flawed or silly or not serious. And it's hard to see that as empowerment. It's repackaged sexism. And we're deeply, deeply in a reactionary political movement. Conservative ideas of gender are becoming acceptable again under the guise of celebrating femininity. When I'm just a girl becomes an excuse for avoiding responsibility or for positioning yourself as inherently less capable, that's not liberation. That's accepting diminishment and calling it cute. Where does this leave us? Women should be able to enjoy feminine aesthetics without shame, of course. When men get to be silly and playful about their hobbies without being infantilized, women should get that same treatment. But when enjoyment of feminine aesthetics become indistinguishable from consumption, when girlhood itself becomes a shopping list, when language starts suggesting that women have to buy these certain things or are inherently less logical or serious, now that's a problem. The solution isn't to shame women for engaging with girlhood aesthetics, but it's to reevaluate why exactly we're doing so and how to interpret this girlhood trend. It's not to pretend that this is pure empowerment or to act like there's no critique to be made. These aren't just individual choices happening in a vacuum. They're happening with systems that have agendas, capitalism, brands wanting to make their money, patriarchy, and algorithmic platforms that are recommending these videos over and over to you. And these agendas aren't about your well-being. They're about engagement metrics and purchase conversion rates. And we have to look at these multiple truths. Some women find genuine joy in these aesthetics, and also the structure is exploitative and just cares about money. Reclaiming femininity matters, but also commodified femininity is not liberation. I can't pronounce femininity. It's so hard for me. It's like a tongue twister. You know, individual women are not the problem. The system that has these choices absolutely is. Women deserve to be fun and silly, and, you know, just a girl can be a little bit harmful when we're not careful. So here's what gets lost in the girlhood aesthetic content. Actual stories of girlhood. Real girlhood is messy and complicated and specific to your own individual experiences. It's shaped by your race, class, geography, your family, your body, your particular moment in history. And I think a lot of these girlhood aesthetic posters want to find something that connects all women besides, I don't know, it's just blurring what women's shared experience actually is into the age of social media where everything has to be consumable and aesthetic. So I really like the idea of girlhood and celebrating that and celebrating what a bunch of women and girls have experienced that, is similar to each other. But this can't be confused with buttons, silly headbands, frills, bows, as I've been saying. I don't know, pastels. There's going to be microtrends each year, every month or so. But we can't get that confused with an actual celebration of femininity. It's about relationships, figuring out who you are when the world is constantly telling you who you should be. Some of it might involve the aesthetics. Some girls do find meaning in fashion and decorating their space, and that's so real to them. But girlhood is also struggling with your body, navigating complex societal dynamics, discovering yourself, processing trauma in childhood, questioning authority, finding your voice, making mistakes, building resilience. And none of that fits easily into a 60-second or 15-second TikTok. None of that can be purchased on Amazon. The girlhood aesthetic videos are not wrong, they're just so incomplete. They take one small slice of the experience. They take what we're experiencing now in a fast fashion microtrend epidemic and present it as the whole thing. But girlhood isn't an aesthetic, it's millions, billions of different experiences. So what would it look like if we celebrate femininity without consuming it? It might look like making things instead of buying things. Having real conversations about girlhood with people whose experiences differ from yours. Engaging with femininity as something you do rather than something you have. The way that you treat people, the values you hold, the communities you build. It might look like being honest about what brings you joy versus what you've been told or feel like might and should bring you joy on an algorithm. Maybe you genuinely love aesthetic things, and that's great. But maybe you're performing it because the algorithm told you this is what girlhood looks like. You need to have this to fit in and to, be trendy. And that's worth examining. It might look like buying less, but also buying better. If you're going to purchase something, purchase it because you genuinely need or love it, not because it's part of this week's microtrend. And, it can sound preachy to hear microtrends bad, blah, blah, blah. But just look deep inside and think of what you actually enjoy and have enjoyed for a longer period of time than the past month where this trend on TikTok has popped up. It might look like being comfortable with the fact that girlhood doesn't have to be aesthetic at all. It can be messy. It doesn't have to photograph well. It doesn't have to fit into TikToks. It doesn't have to fit a trend. It doesn't have to make sense to anyone but you. But we also need to be clear-eyed about what's happening on these platforms. TikTok is not a neutral space for self-expression. It's not a good place to actually develop who you are and what you believe in. It's a commercial platform designed to keep you scrolling and facilitate purchases. Every aesthetic video is potentially an advertisement. Sometimes you don't even know until you click on their profile link and where they have all their affiliate links. You know, many of the popular girlhood aesthetic creators are being paid. And sometimes this is shown on the video description, but often it's not. The algorithm learns what keeps you engaged, and what keeps you engaged is content that makes you feel something. Aspiration, nostalgia, feminine, belonging, inadequacy, desire. Girlhood aesthetic content is algorithmically optimized because it triggers all of these emotions simultaneously. You see the aesthetic and feel aspiration, you feel nostalgic and longing for your childhood or a community in which you belong. You see your own room and maybe it doesn't match or feels inadequate, and all of these translate into desire to buy things, to fix up your space, to fix your looks. The algorithm doesn't care about your well-being, it cares about engagement and consumption. Many of the people creating and consuming girlhood aesthetic content are teenagers or young adults, doing the work of identity formation in algorithmic spaces. Previous generations got to figure out who they were in privacy, relatively. You know, you can try on different identities, make mistakes, grow and change, and most of it wasn't documented. But Gen Z is growing up with every phase potentially recorded and shared, and the algorithm it rewards consistency. You build a following around a particular aesthetic, and if you change, you might lose that following. So, you know, there's pressure to perform a stable identity even while you're figuring out who you are. And the same can go for if you don't move on to the next trend. If you do try out a new micro trend and you enjoy it, you love it, you see these clothes and you're like, this is so me. But then you see the internet moving away from what you've just figured out about yourself. You might feel this pressure to catch up and leave behind what you might have discovered through that. You know, the easiest way to perform stability is through consumption. When your identity is your brand and your brand is your aesthetic, changing becomes terrifying. So, young women stay locked into aesthetics that might not actually fit them anymore. Because you know, the social and algorithmic cost of change is too high. Or, you know, the cost of not keeping up with the trends is too high as well. You might fall off. And that's not freedom, that's not self-expression. That's not even taking the good out of experiencing these microtrends. Girlhood is real and femininity is real. The desire to celebrate both is real and valid and important. But girlhood isn't an aesthetic that you can purchase or move on from. It involves millions of experiences, none of them that can be reduced to a shopping list or something being sold on TikTok. Like, you can like pink and still be feminist. You can enjoy aesthetic content without letting it define you. You can find genuine joy in cute things without consuming yourself into oblivion. You know, we just have to be honest about what's happening. Culturally, algorithmically, we have to look at these videos that say girlhood and then show these pastel videos of objects around their house. But you have to look at that and say, no, that's not girlhood, that's marketing, or that's something that's trending right now. We have to celebrate, I don't know why my nose is itchy right now. We have to celebrate femininity without commodifying it. We have to honor girlhood without flattening it out to a single, narrowable, purchasable experience. We have to ask, what would it look like to grow up as a girl, explore femininity, and build community with other women in ways that aren't centered around spending? Maybe it would look like messier rooms, but also better conversations. It's less time curating and more time creating. Fewer things, but more meaning. Maybe it would look like your girlhood. Whether or not it matches with anyone else's aesthetic or with your Pinterest feed. Being enough exactly as it was. The algorithm doesn't want you to believe that, and it doesn't want you to think that that's okay. It wants you to keep buying, keep scrolling, keep feeling like you're not quite there or not expressing your feminine aspects enough. You're just one more purchase away from the authentic experience and from blowing up on TikTok. But you are always enough. Your girlhood was always real, and you don't have to buy a single thing to prove it. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts. I know this can be kind of a tricky topic, but I totally want to hear what you guys think. Is there any micro trends that you have really enjoyed and found peace and love in and feel like that's something that is true to yourself? Or are there any that you've participated in that you kind of regret buying things from? Let me know. What do you think of girlhood as an aesthetic, and if it should even be categorized as that? What was your girlhood like? Please subscribe. Well, subscribe for more chit chat. Bye.